Andrew, I mean, you may remember this, and some of the viewers
Subscriber
may
growth.
remember this.
Yeah.
This is very similar language. If you recall, a couple of years ago, there was another big company, in fact, the biggest company out there, that said something similar that shocked folks, and that was Apple.
Yes.
And when Apple came out during an earnings call a few years ago and said, look, we're no longer going to talk about here's how many iPhones we sold or that we're guiding to selling for the next fiscal year, because Wall Street literally got so hung up on the number, not how much money, but just the freaking number of how many iPhones were sold, that it was causing too many problems for Apple, because Apple was trying to grow past this. Apple was trying to no, we're going to become a service revenue company. We're trying to get to the point to where we're going to have, and they have it now. You see the growth in their Apple services. Their subscription revenue has exploded in the last 2 years. And they didn't want to become a company that would be defined every year fiscally by how many fucking iPhones they sold at the Apple Store and Best Buy. It's like we're more than just the iPhone. So again, I'm not saying that they're directly comparative, but from the standpoint of it's a similar thing that happened with another big headline company, this is what Disney's doing here, saying, look, we're not going to keep guiding forward towards how many subscribers we think we're going to pick up. We're going to guide towards overall operating income, revenue, profitability, earnings per share, blah, 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 blah. And look, I think, again, to Disney's credit, I think that's a smart move. The problem is right now they're trying to get their foot out of the giant pile of cow shit that they've been stepping in for the last several years with all of the exuberance over, look how many subs we got. It's like they have to unwind that. The same way that Apple kind of did for years, touting how many iPhones they sold, and they realize we have to stop touting this, and we have to untrain what we've trained into people. And look, the same goes for Netflix and everybody else. Netflix had to make the same kind of pivot to where it's like, stop asking us and worrying about how many subscribers that we have or how many we picked up new in the quarter. We're reaching a point of saturation. Let's talk about how much freaking money we're making.
Well, yeah, but I mean, once again, they're not doing that, and so it's like failures.
No, Disney's making no money with Disney Plus. They're losing their ass with Disney Plus.
So to talk about it right here, there's still, so they were losing obviously the 4 million subs. We talked about that. We covered that live. You and I have talked about that ad nauseum. So during the the second quarter of 2023, which ended in April, they lost 4 million paid subscribers, which shocked analysts who expected it to add 1.7 million. Streaming revenues increased from year earlier due to a price hike, but there were still horrendous losses, right? So it was still at a loss, right? They were still running at a loss. Because of the news, Disney common stock declined $8.83 per share, more than 8% in a single day in May, which is absolutely bonkers. Yeah. So because of this, because of their declines in the market value, the shareholders have been damaged. So what are they suing for? They're suing for insider trading, right? They're saying that certain individual defendants capitalized on the artificially inflated stock by selling significant portions of their holdings of common stock. So Chapek and McCarthy sold tens of thousands of shares for proceeds of nearly 14 million. They're suspiciously large in quantity. The timing is inconsistent with pre and post relevant period trading practices. So Chapek sold 10,000 shares of his personal Disney stock between August 21 and September 21. McCarthy sold almost 80,000 shares of her stock between January 21st and February 21st for $12 million in profit. So that's what we would call, or what is alleged, but that is the nexus. That is the center of insider trading.
Yeah, and it could be that's going to be for a court to decide. I mean, at the same time, that's kind of in that era when the Disney stock price was in the stratosphere. Now, what you also have to understand is that, for the people looking at this kind of thing,
Okay, but Valiant, real quick though.
Mhm.
Typically, if you are an executive or something else like that, you can set up, and I'm going to explain this in a very layman terms, and you can make it more technical. But you can set up pretty much a plan, like where you have a structured plan to like sell off your stock at like certain intervals, right?
Sure.
You can even put that out of your control, saying like, hey, a third party has control. This like a trustee has a plan to, okay, I'm going to sell my stock every quarter. I'm going to sell maybe 1,000 shares, whatever. I'm just making up a number, right? And you just say, okay, I'm going to put that. That will protect you. That will shield you from any potential liability, right? There are ways to protect you from accusations, insinuations of insider trading. And certainly if you're the CEO, you have to be extraordinarily cautious of any view and any perception of insider trading.
Generally speaking, at that level, if you're going to sell any kind of significant number of shares, you'd probably have a sit down with your general legal counsel at a company like Disney, like Carlos Gutierrez over there at Disney. Talk about that, and look, here's the thing. A lot of times with those higher level executives, they're being awarded X number of shares per year based on performance as part of their employment contract. So a lot of times they might have a salary of like $1 million a year, but they might have, 5, 10, 15, 20, $25 million a year in stock and stock options afforded to them. And those stocks and stock options usually have some kind of holding period. They have a vesting schedule. So you have to hold them for X amount of period. So you might have to hold them for a year or 2 years or something like this.
Right.
And after which point, if you decide that you want to liquidate those shares, you can. So a lot of times these guys will sit on, and I'm not saying just at Disney, this is across the S&P and most publicly traded companies. A lot of times these guys will sit on these shares, and then they will decide once that vesting schedule is up and they can liquidate, they will. I know people that work for UPS that they get shares all the time. The guys that drive the trucks, they get shares of stock. Now, what happens is they get shares of stock every year as part of driving the truck for UPS. That's part of their compensation and bonus. They can decide to sit on the stock and hang on to it into their retirement, or after a certain period of time where they've held it, maybe 6 months, 3 months, or a year, they can turn around, they can liquidate that stock and just take the money and keep working.
Correct.
Same thing happens at the executive level. So just to, I just want to be cautious about, people thinking that just because somebody at the executive level sells shares of stock, that there's something nefarious going on.
Right. No, not necessarily.
Not
right.
Necessarily. Yeah.
But that being said, you have to be, once again, it's a balancing act, right? Just like balancing the duty of the company and the shareholder and the board, right? That's a balancing act. And when one thing falls out of balance, you get a question, right? So it's like, yes, you are allowed to, when things vest, it's your right to sell them, right? But you should do that, like you said, with consultation of the general counsel, with consultation of your financial advisor. There's many vehicles or ways to set that up to do that, and to keep it above board, right?
Yeah.
So let me get into some of these charges. So obviously we have the insider trading allegation, which is quite big, and I'll get into the actual count itself. So this is against the individual defendants, which are just all the individuals that were named, for violations of Section 14A of the Exchange Act. So Section 14A of the Securities and Exchange Act says it's unlawful for any person to use by the mail or means of interstate commerce, which means just essentially talking in any way by phone, email, whatever else, in contravention of the rules of the SEC, as the SEC may prescribe, to solicit or permit the use of his name to solicit any proxy or consent or authorization in respect to any security, right? And then it goes on to say that no proxy statement shall consider any statement at the time of which is false or misleading as to any material fact. So what they're saying is that those proxy statements about the financial situation of Disney Plus, about the profitability of Disney Plus, about the subscriber growth, by putting in those proxy statements, which are covered by the SEC, that is a violation of the Securities and Exchange Act, right? So this is something that's very important for you guys. When you file things that are covered by the SEC, they have to be true. That's why I flip out about the bonds, right? I'm like, this is crazy, because these are filed, these are subject to the purview of the SEC. They can look at these things. Proxy statements are covered. So you have to make sure that no statement that you put in there is false or misleading. So when I'm whipping my, when I'm twirling my t-shirt around my head, flipping out, it's because I see statements in there that could be false or misleading, which is at least grounds enough to file the suit. Whether or not they would win the suit at trial, they might lose at trial, right? But it's enough to bring it's enough to bring a claim at trial. That's why your counsel not only reviews the statements themselves, but everything that's said on these earnings calls. That's why when we pay attention,
that's why they're always scripted,
calls,
folks. People can. Yes. It sounds like he's reading from a script. Yes, they all read from a script for that reason. Until, of course, they get to the Q&A.
This video has been a clip of a previous live stream, and it's clipped so you can get the information in a shorter, compact package, the information you need. If you want the full video, the whole context, the whole thing, you can check out the full stream. That is in the link below. Check that out, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.